The FCC approved SpaceX Starlink satellite to phone testing with one caveat. Let's go check it out. Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much once again joining me for tea time. Today we have a little bit of fireside. That smokiness, guys, so good, so good. I hope you're joining me with your cup of tea, maybe a cup of coffee, hanging out, talking tech, talking photo, talking video. Today is a technology day. It's kind of a follow-up to a video that I did a few months back where I was talking about how T-Mobile and SpaceX Starlink were combining forces, let's say. They were going to be doing backhauling together, but also T-Mobile clients would be able to have coverage where there is no cell towers anywhere, no Wi-Fi, nothing, being able to communicate direct to satellites. So this was something that was really big. We know Apple is doing it already. We can get into that before the end of this video. I'll talk a little bit about that. But being able to have this service is really a lifesaver for a lot of people that are out and about, let's say on the top of a mountain somewhere, that have absolutely no coverage at all, that used to need some type of sat phone, some type of satellite phone that cost them thousands and thousands of dollars, and then the service, maybe they're using Iridium or something. Now they don't have to do that anymore. So not only is SpaceX Starlink going to get together with T-Mobile to provide this satellite to phone coverage in the US, but they're also going to provide it to other networks outside of the US. I wrote these down. One of them was Rogers in Canada. You have Optus in Australia, 1NZ in New Zealand, Salt in Switzerland, and finally you have KDDI in Japan. They will all get this service, or they're all slated to have this service once it is available. And testing has supposed to have happened months and months and months ago, but the reason it hasn't is because of the FCC. Approval, regulatory approval. There's been a ton of filings and litigation by all different companies saying that somehow SpaceX Starlink's service, their sat to phone service, is going to adversely affect them. So I was reading an article. I want to go through this article with you, and then I want to give you my commentary. And as always, I want to hear from you. What do you think about all of this? There is a caveat. Even though the FCC is now approving this and testing can go forward, there is a caveat that we'll get into. Anyways, let's jump right into this article, and then we'll dig in a little bit deeper. It starts out by saying, after months of waiting, SpaceX has received partial clearance from the Federal Communications Commission, or the FCC, to start deploying the company's cellular Starlink system, but only to conduct short tests. Now that is a little bit strange. Start deploying the company's cellular Starlink system. We'll get into that in just a second. On Friday, the FCC decided to, quote, grant in part, defer in part, the company's application to operate the satellite service, which is being designed to beam connectivity to T-Mobile smartphones. Not just T-Mobile, like I said before. They'll get it right eventually. The FCC's ruling authorized SpaceX to deploy a modified version of a previously authorized Gen 2 Starlink satellite. There's something with that too that I don't think is right. We'll get into that. However, the company is only receiving authorization so that it can verify the radios on the satellites work. In particular, SpaceX has been granted permission to utilize the frequency bands of 1910 megahertz to 1915 and 1990 to 1995 megahertz for a brief on-orbit assessment of the antennas shortly after deploying each satellite. This is also strange. Hang in there. The authorization allows for a period of 10 days or less to ensure the initial functionality of the satellite antennas as specified by the FCC. The ruling also says that SpaceX must prevent the communication test from causing radio interference with other services. I spoke on this in a previous video when I talked about a company putting in filings to the FCC stating that there's going to be massive RF interference and was going to affect a massive swath of area, like 5,500 kilometers, some crazy amount of interference. And then later on, this was debunked by SpaceX Starlink. Anyways, let's finish this article. It says, quote, "In the event any harmful interference during SpaceX's limited on-orbit testing, SpaceX shall cease operations immediately if such event occurs," the FCC added. SpaceX still needs full FCC approval before it can begin operating the cellular Starlink system for U.S. customers. The commission signaled it deferred parts of the company's application because SpaceX didn't complete a Schedule S form detailing the satellite's technical and operational specs. Instead, SpaceX requested a waiver citing limitations in the Schedule C that prevents it from accurately describing certain aspects of the satellite technology. Yeah, that's probably the case because probably the Schedule C was written up way back in like 1969, So I'm exaggerating, obviously, but it's probably outdated, and some of the technology probably wouldn't be able to go into the small areas that are on that Schedule C, and they would probably have to put together a 20-page addendum for it. So they're saying, listen, this is kind of like outdated. We will give you the information, but we can't do it on this Schedule C. Can you provide us with like a temporary waiver and we will get you the information? SpaceX and the FCC didn't immediately respond to a request for comment. But for months now, the company has been urging the U.S. regulator for clearance to operate the cellular Starlink system. Last week, SpaceX filed a separate application to test the technology over 840 satellites starting as soon as next week, pending approval from the FCC. Important information there. Note. However, the FCC has been hearing concerns from rival companies about the cellular Starlink system causing radio interference, like I just spoke about. Hence, it's possible that the commission is trying to reach a middle ground as it continues to weigh granting full approval to SpaceX Starlink's application. The company is currently aiming to launch the cellular Starlink system to power satellite-based text messaging sometime next year, and then video as well as voice calls the year after. So in 2024, SpaceX Starlink is looking to provide cellular to phone service for texting only, and then in 2025 to 2026, they will be providing full data coverage, meaning photos, videos, any type of data at all. So that's going to be a really big deal. So I could see how regular cell phone providers are not really liking this very much, because when you have a massive network of 42,000 satellites in low Earth orbit, and you can pick up your phone and make a call, no matter if you have a cell tower nearby or not, that's a big deal. That means that SpaceX Starlink could be like an all-encompassing type of communication network where you don't even need any of these providers. I mean, just think about it, right? You don't need a cell tower means that you don't need a cellular provider, right? Because you are using Starlink. Now, of course, you will need a phone, but it could be carrierless. You could use any 5G phone and connect to SpaceX Starlink satellites. Think about that. That has some massive repercussions, right? I think a lot of these cell phone providers, cell phone companies are really seeing the writing on the wall. The way I look at it, it's almost like DirecTV and Dish Network. I've said this in the past. When SpaceX Starlink came alive, let's say, a couple of years back, 24 months ago or so, DirecTV and Dish Network really plummeted. Why? Because you could just do your IPTV stuff and just get like YouTube TV or get whatever. Once you have data, you don't need them anymore, even when you're in a rural area. Whereas a lot of these dish companies, right, were looking to compete with all of the on-ground cable companies and fiber companies, right, in rural areas. where they didn't have that type of coverage. Whereas now you really don't need to worry about it or as much because you could get Starlink on the top of a mountain somewhere. They already have Starlink in the ocean. They got Starlink on the top of planes flying around. I mean, there's Starlink everywhere. It will be ubiquitous. I mean, you're looking at 42,000 satellites eventually, meaning that the dish that you currently have that's pointing, let's say, east, northeast at like maybe 15 or 20 degrees will eventually not need to do that. It will just simply point straight up. Why? Because within that 110 degree swath of sky that it sees, there's going to be probably an ample amount of satellites up there. You won't need to direct it in a certain direction anymore because there'll be so many. So anyways, getting into this a little bit deeper, as I always do on this channel, Apple has been doing this for a long period of time, for a few years. I never heard of any type of FCC approval problems. Did you? They just simply got in bed with Globalstar, who is the system that is providing them that cellular coverage. They're using the 1600 megahertz to 2400 megahertz range, one for uplink, one for downlink. And that's it. It just works. They only do texting, obviously. It's for SOSing, let's say, in case of emergency. That's the way they have it set up. SpaceX Starlink isn't going for in case of emergency. They're starting out with text, but eventually they're going to go into full data coverage. And once again, I think that is what is scaring people. So OmniSpace is one of those companies that they were talking about in this article without talking about them. And in my last video that I did about this, I said this: in September, SpaceX told the FCC that OmniSpace was making false claims about the Starlink cellular service posing an interference risk. SpaceX also alleged that OmniSpace was focused on serving foreign customers rather than US users. Important. Quote, SpaceX will not cause harmful interference to OmniSpace's speculative foreign system. I love that. The dig, right? And OmniSpace's shape-shifting analysis provides no basis for the commission to delay the development of beneficial services to millions of American consumers. Once again, a brilliant dig. So this is what I was talking about in a previous video, OmniSpace being one of those companies. Besides Dish Network, there's been a lot of companies that have been going after SpaceX Starlink for this because they don't want it to happen. And rightfully so, they don't want it to happen. It's going to directly affect their bottom line and possibly even put them out of business. So, who will win? That's always the question, right? Will it be OmniSpace or Dish Network or any of these other companies putting in these filings with the FCC opposing SpaceX Starlink's cellular to phone service? And it's hard to say, but in my personal opinion, I think SpaceX Starlink will prevail. Now, one thing that I've figured out over the course of the years that I've been on this planet is that the judicial system isn't fair. Anyone that has been to court and has been right and ended up losing a lawsuit will attest to this. I've found that it doesn't matter the plaintiff or the defendant who has the larger purse usually ends up winning. That's just it. They can afford better attorneys to put in more motions, better motions, so on and so forth. Okay, so we know that SpaceX Starlink, we know Elon Musk has money to burn. He's got a ton of money, meaning he must have a legal team that is exceptional. So in the end, he will prevail. That's my personal opinion. Because remember, when you see Lady Justice, right, in a courtroom somewhere, in the back rooms of your attorney's office or whatnot, and you see Lady Justice and you see that she has a sword in one hand and she has a scale in the other, and then she's blindfolded, right? The sword representing the enforcement of justice. And then you have the scale, which represents the weighing of the facts or the evidence. And then finally, the blindfold representing the impartiality. Quote, impartiality, where justice is applied objectively without bias. We know that that's not the case. We know that that is absolutely not the case. It would be nice, but that's not the case. Once again, the one that has the greatest amount of resources, doesn't matter if it's the plaintiff or if it is the defendant, usually wins. So like I said, I do believe that SpaceX will win here, no matter how you look at it. That being said, they can definitely stagnate, slow things down, drag things through the mud, make it difficult, extend it as long as possible. Now, I told you there was something that I want to talk to you about that I was reading through when I gave you notations. Remember this. One of the things was, it said this. It said, quote, last week, SpaceX filed a separate application to test the technology over 840 satellites starting as soon as next week, pending approval from the FCC. Does that kind of ring a bell a little bit? Just at the beginning of this article, they were talking about them launching up new satellites that have this technology on them, and as soon as they are in orbit, they can test for 10 days or short period of time, as long as there's no interference. If there's interference, you must shut it down. That's the caveat. But by they saying that they can test as soon as next week, 840 satellites, that means that I was right months ago when I said that the version 2 mini satellites that were going into orbit have the technology, have the modems, have those transceivers, have the tech on board already to be able to do the satellite to phone coverage, the satellite to phone service. It's already there. It's just turned off. How else would they be able to test this service on 840 satellites within a week? Those have to be the SpaceX Starlink version 2 mini satellites that are currently in orbit. Think about it. I mean, I could be wrong, but I don't think I am. So that means that these things are ready to go. So if the FCC gave them approval to test, boom, they can test 840 satellites to see if those modems, the modulators and demodulators, hence the name modem, right? Modulation, demodulation. That's where it comes from, modem. To make sure those modems are working on the satellites. And if they are, fantastic. They just now have to wait for the full approval by the FCC for them to go and cull through all of these filings and litigation and more filings to give them the full approval. And when that happens, SpaceX Starlink will be able to now have coverage with or through T-Mobile here in the US for texting without having any cellular towers near you. That is a big deal. That is a big deal. And then it will migrate into the rest of the world. Like I said, New Zealand, Switzerland, Japan, so on and so forth. The only caveat to testing, according to the FCC, is that SpaceX Starlink, not the FCC, must have a kill switch, all right? Not the FCC. Starlink must have a kill switch. So if another provider says that they are currently receiving some type of RF interference, radio frequency interference, they will be able to immediately hit that kill switch and stop the interference. So that's, once again, the only caveat here. They need to be able to flip that kill switch, shut it off immediately, and that is basically it. And like I said, I really do believe that they do not need to launch any new satellites with these modems built in because they are already built into all of the version 2 mini satellites. That's what I am inferring from this article. What do you think? What do you think? Down below, let's have this discussion. I'm excited about it because I think that this is a really big step forward. And once texting is working, and then in 2025, we start seeing video and calling and all the rest, these cell phone companies really are going to need to take heed and figure out what they're going to do. Because we see companies like Dish Network saying, hey, we need to move into this, let's call it T-Mobile internet, the home internet, or the AT&T Internet Air, or the Verizon home internet. We need to move into that type of technology with the cell towers. And they have been working on this for a while because they know that those satellites sitting in GEO, all right, that are focused on the Earth, sending that TV signal, their days are numbered. All right, their days are numbered. So moving into that type of technology will at least give them a new road to head down in comparison to just going belly up. That's my opinion. Now, the same holds true with the cellular networks. One, SpaceX Starlink has ubiquitous coverage with 42,000 satellites where you have full data connectivity anywhere you are without cell towers. That is, like I said, going to be a major problem for all of these cell phone providers. And I like to see it. I'm very happy for it because these cell phone providers and companies like Dish Network and DirecTV have been raping the public for so many years, for so many billions and trillions of dollars, that their time has come. And once again, I'm happy. Are you? Let's have the discussion down below. If you enjoyed this, even in the least, throw the video a thumbs up. That would be fantastic. Don't forget to subscribe. If you are subscribed, thank you. I appreciate that. Click this little button over here so when I go live or when a new video comes out, you will be notified of it immediately. If you want to say thank you for all of my hard work, there's a little thank you button right down here. Click on that. Give $1 or $2 if you like. If not, that's perfectly fine. Consider becoming a member of the channel. That would be even better. If you're looking for a VPN, look no further. Check out Pure VPN. The nice folks over there gave us a promo code, which is JCristina. You'll get 15% additional off at checkout. Or if you cannot remember that promo code, JCristina, that's fine. Go to jcristina.com/VPN. Once again, jcristina.com/VPN. Also, if you haven't picked up any of my ebooks as of yet, why the hell not? They're free. Go to jcristina.com/books. Once again, jcristina.com/books. And finally, head over to my website, jcristina.com, where you can find all the photography tools I've invented for you and the merch, as well as the teas and everything else. If you like something, please consider picking it up. That would be great, supporting me and my family. Many blessings to you and your family. Stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll see you in the next one. Love you all.